the bank.
Hey Brett, how's it going this week?
Good, Ange. How are you?
Good. Well, that means it's another episode of Money in the Bank, the podcast where we talk about all things related to personal finance and then some. So, Brett, are you ready for a trivia question?
Oh, you said last week we weren't doing these anymore.
Oh, yeah. Well, this one is very easy.
Oh, okay.
When is, and we've talked about this before, when is the best time to invest your money?
Today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I always say yesterday, but today works too.
I thought this is a trick question look on your face.
So we are going to be talking about retirement, which is probably one of my favorite topics.
That's true. We have talked about retirement before. So what are we talking about that's different today?
So we've talked about retirement in a couple different ways, but I actually wanted to talk to people and tell them how much they need to save at every age to retire at 65. So like if you are, in your 20s and starting out at work, like how much should you be saving for retirement? Or maybe you missed the boat on that and you're in your 40s. Well, how much should you be saving for retirement? So before I kind of dive into that, I want to talk about the calculation a little bit. So this assumes that you have nothing currently saved up for retirement. It assumes that you will, because if you can save, let's say 10%, it means you're spending 90% of your salary. So it's going to project out and make sure that you can continue spending what you've been spending. Okay. So let's say that you make $50,000 and you can save 10%, so you can save $5,000. So you're spending $45,000. So we're going to make sure you can continue spending $45,000 in retirement. And this also does not include Social Security benefits. Mm-hmm. So this is like if you save everything yourself, how much you need to save. And also it assumes that you will be keeping this money invested. So, this is for people who are investing in mutual funds and earning on average 7% interest year over year, and will continue to do that in retirement. So if you want to play it safe and take all your money out and bury it in the backyard, then you're going to need to save up more money than what I'm saying right now.
Okay, yeah, so it's a little bit of a loaded, guideline, but with some flexibility depending on how you save and what your expenses are, and if you want to have less expenses in retirement, right? That all plays into a factor here, but so this is just a straight line, best guess kind of scenario.
Yeah. And I didn't want to factor in Social Security because we do have listeners in other countries that may have different programs. So you can kind of bake your own assumption in on top. This is just like the pure math if nobody's helping you, how much you need to save. And, and they actually say that most retirees, when they retire, their expenses actually decrease. So if anything, as always, my numbers are a little bit conservative because I am very conservative by nature. I'm an actuary. I'm very risk averse. So if you save what I say on this paper, you will have a 90% success rate in retirement.
Okay. So what's an example there?
All right. So let's start. So let's say you're 22 years old and you want to retire at 65. You have to save 15%.
15% of my expenses in general?
15% of your... No.
Or sorry, of my income.
Yes.
So 15% of my income, regardless of what my income is.
Yep.
Okay.
So, a lot of times if you work for a company, they might do a match. So maybe they put in 6, right? So then you have to just put in 9. So, if you are 28, then you need to save 20%. So we've jumped 5% in 6 years. So this is why the earlier you start, the easier it is, right?
Right, and I imagine this number is just going to get worse and worse as we go.
Yeah. So actually, this is a really good wake-up call for all of our older listeners if they have not started saving for retirement. Because now, 33, you're knocking on this door, Brett, soon here.
Yeah, isn't that how old your sister is, right? It's
yeah.
pretty close.
Yep. So then you have to save 25% of your income. So
wow, okay.
I feel like already at that point, that's a good chunk. That's a quarter of your income that just needs to be devoted to savings. So then we'll jump up to 37. So I actually also have another sister that's 37. 30% of your income. So
we're still in the doable range, right?
Yeah.
Yep. This is totally...
I think it's very doable still.
Mm-hmm.
But it does get harder, right? Especially for a lot of times by the time you're in your 30s, maybe you have a family, and it's in general just, a little bit harder for people to save with kids. So now if you add on this like additional savings because you didn't start younger, like I won't lie, it is hard, right? And it's going to require sacrifice, but you also have to like weigh the, the opportunity of being able to retire, right? Okay, so we'll jump up to 40. So can you guess how much you have to save at 40?
35%?
Yeah.
Oh, we're just going by fives.
We're just going by fives, yeah. So then we'll go to 43, and you have to save 40%. 46, you have to save 45%. 48, you need to save 50%. Now, I want to stop here for a second because we're going to be out of the 40s after this, but that's crazy to me. Like,
so you're already at half.
You're already at half. But, I mean, if you think about it, at 48, if you want to retire at 65, you have 17 years left. So you've already been working probably for 20 some years, and, you have 17 left to go. So you're over halfway through your working career. And if you didn't put anything away, like, it gets increasingly difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're jumping up to 51, and you have to save 55%. 53, you'd have to save 60%. 55, you'd have to save 65%. And if you wait until you're 60 and you want to retire when you're 65, you need to save 80% of your income.
Wow. So at some point there, it becomes more or less unrealistic, right? I mean, for a lot of people, especially in their later stage of their career, I don't know anybody that's saving 80% of their income, including me.
We're actually not super far off.
With both of us, though, because this formula is assuming one person, right? Single income?
It doesn't matter. It applies to single or dual because it's a percentage.
It's a percentage.
So, if you're dual, your expenses are typically lower and it's probably easier to hit these savings goals. But this, because it's a percentage, it applies to anybody. So, I think it's just kind of eye-opening, and it helps you realize that, like, literally the earlier you start, the better. But I also kind of want to play devil's advocate and say, like, there are more and more bloggers who achieved financial independence and retired in their 30s by looking at this and saying, okay, well, instead of saying, I want to retire at 65, I'm going to change that age to 35. And now, I started working at 22, so I'm giving myself 14 years to hit that goal. And if I save, 55% of what I make, I can retire in my 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like another whole cohort of people that are definitely achieving these high savings rates to retire at ridiculously young ages.
Right. Yeah. We saw something on like NBC or something the other day, right? Some news article came out. Some guy in his 30s, again, retired early, right? And I'm like, well, we're going to retire by the time like you're 30, so I don't know why you're not in the news too.
Yeah, that's right. Put Angie in the news.
Yeah, but by looking at that table, right, you just need to know what do you need to save, and as soon as you come up with that plan to say I want to hit this number, and then you can work toward that plan.
Right.
You can set goals toward that. You can adjust your income and adjust your expenses, prioritize what is important, what isn't. Right? Is retiring by the time you're 30 or 35 or whatever more important than going to the movies every week, right? It really helps you control your expenses when you have like a goal that's like, I don't have to work ever again in my life, right? Like that's a really powerful motivator.
Well, I would say that's what has completely shaped us into the super frugal, intense savers that we have become, is the idea of being free, basically. Because it doesn't necessarily mean we have to quit our jobs, but it just means we have the option to never work again. Right. And it gives us a lot of cool opportunities, like I feel like more and more I hear people that, they don't have to work, but they found something that really spoke to them, or they really enjoy it, so they continue working, right? Like, just because you might retire at an ultra young age doesn't mean you never contribute anything to society again. Most early retirees that I've talked to are not the type of people that, like, sit at home and, watch soap operas all day. They're still out doing stuff. They just are doing different stuff. And I think it kind of is the whole concept of you have to have something to retire to. Whether you are in your 60s or in your 30s, you can't just, like, retire to being a couch potato. That's, like, not the key to happiness, right? But yeah, so, I think it's really interesting to think about that way. And I will say, if you're retiring at a younger age, it is a little bit scarier because if you're retiring at 65 and you have this lump sum saved up, like you have, probably 30 years to your end of life. If you retire at 35, you have 60 years. So like you might want to be a little bit more flexible with being willing to go back to work if something happens, or being willing, I think the big thing is being willing to cut back on your expenses if there's a year where, things are a little tight, right? But I think if you're like focused on that goal, like you can do it. You can do anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think kind of now going back to the traditional 65, I also think if you're in your 30s or 40s and you hear, okay, I'm 40, I need to save 35% of my paycheck. That's impossible. I can't save that much. Don't let that scare you away from saving anything. It is far better to be like, okay, well, that seems unreasonable, but I could save 10%. Do the 10% because, like I mentioned, this doesn't factor in Social Security. And, even that 10%, like you'll build momentum, right?
Right. And especially starting earlier rather than later.
Yeah. And if you're in your 40s and you still have 25 years of your career left, you're probably going to get raises. You can use that to pad your retirement savings as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we talked about already, like 10% when you're, what was it, 30, close to 30 was worth 20% when you're 40 already.
Right.
Somewhere in there, right? Just depending on how it scales there and what the compound interest looks like and, all that, the rates. So just every little bit helps, especially when you're young.
Yeah. Well, and even, when you're not, like if you're 55 and you have not started saving for retirement, like start now because maybe you won't hit 65, but maybe you can hit 70, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, 65 is not a hard and fast rule. That's kind of what just been the standard in this country for a long time, but that dates back to like the Great Depression era when the life expectancy was like 5 years after that, And so, I think there's actually a lot more people working later in life, and it's not a bad thing because like I said, if you have nothing to retire to, I've talked to so many people who retire and they get so bored and then they end up like going back to work or picking up something just to like give themselves a purpose.
Right. Well, statistically, you're more likely to die if you just retire and like have nothing to go to. But if you're just like at home and just reheat TV dinners and watch, Wheel of Fortune every day, you're more likely to have a heart attack.
That took a turn real quick.
It's true. So keep active when you want to move into retirement, whether that's 30 or 70 or 65. Right, just plan for what that looks like too. Just start thinking about what does retirement mean for you.
Yeah.
Right.
So is that something you've thought about personally or not yet? Because we talked about our goals to retire at a young age. Like what, I guess because I think we both kind of had this thought probably, but then I think I kind of came to you and I was like, here's like the plan to get us to early retirement. But like, what motivates you about that?
Well, I mean, I was really looking forward to Wheel of Fortune and TV dinners until like science got in the way and really put a dampering on my plan. But no, I think just like being able to have the flexibility to go and do anything creatively that you want to do and have, kind of a safety net behind you to say like, if I fail, it doesn't matter. Right.
Right.
And I'm building, whatever you want to do, I'm building it for me. I'm not building it because I have to, or I have to bring in revenue, by the end of the month and it pushes the deadline. Sure, that's like a motivator for some people, right? And will cause them to like do things that maybe they wouldn't do or, push through work more efficiently or things like that. But it also taints your product a little bit too, right? Because then you're going to be like, I've been listening to a lot of like people on YouTube lately talking about like their careers in that space and like how they equate ad revenue to like what they're creating, right? And they want to build certain things in a certain way and do things for them regardless of what the subscriber count is or whatever, but they can make very, very little money compared to like this like whatever Joe Schmo ad company that comes to them because they have 100,000 subscribers and just says like, plug this into the thing and we'll give you like $300, right? Or we'll give you $1,000, or depending on how many people like see the video, we'll give you like $10,000, right? That's where all the money is right now. Mm-hmm. And it's very, very like tainting to that creator space. So like being able to go do whatever you'd want to, especially for those guys, to be able to create whatever and not worry about having to like, pump ads into their stuff.
Right.
Is it's a power that most people don't have.
And I actually think it can make you a better business person when you're not so focused on the bottom line all the time. So I'm going to say this as, I was actually reading an article about somebody who retired early, and she dabbled in real estate. So this naturally piqued my interest because I'm super into real estate. And she got her license, became an agent, and she had friends that they were looking at houses with her, and she just enjoyed going out and looking at houses. And I'm reading this article and I'm like, is this me? This could be me, right? This is me. And so she was showing them houses. Well, then they found out one of their friends was getting ready to sell their house, and they loved it and they wanted to buy it. But they kind of had this conundrum of we don't have to use an agent because we can just do for sale by owner. The two of us can agree to the terms. We can go to a title agency and be done. And they went to this, real estate friend, and they were like, we're really sorry. Should we pay you for your time? And because she had retired early, she was like, no, don't worry about it. This is my hobby. This is fun for me. And they were like, well, we feel bad. We took your time. And she was just like, it's fine. This is, fun. And because of that, everybody was happy. They got the house they wanted at a really good price, and, nobody lost out. But I think if you were doing that with somebody who was that was their career and that's what got them to put food on the table, of course they're going to feel, burned by that, I guess. And of course you don't want to undersell yourself or undervalue yourself. But I think if you're doing stuff for fun and just getting to a point where it's well, everybody won in this scenario, whatever, when money's taken out of the equation, it just makes life less stressful, I guess, is maybe what's appealing to me.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, you don't want to undervalue your work versus your time versus, just because you don't need the money doesn't mean you didn't deserve to get that money for the time that, your skill set or whatever, right? You shouldn't undervalue yourself.
Correct.
Because of that particular
But in this
situation.
unique scenario, yeah. It was some of they were all really good friends, and it's nice that money didn't spoil a friendship, because they could remove themselves from that and be it's not worth losing friends for, they went and looked at 3 houses together and whatever, she would have made what, couple grand off the sale anyways. So I think when you can step back, and I say that, and I know to some people a couple grand sounds like a ton of money, but I think once you've built up this portfolio and you're able to retire, I can survive for the rest of my life on my nest egg, it's not worth, giving up friendships for a couple grand,
Right. And you can operate in a different way, right? It allows you flexibility to not, if you release the shackle of having to get that commission coming in every month to survive, you can be more efficient. You can play a longer term game if you want to, right? You don't have to be optimizing and trying to sell immediately. You can build up your process and build up different systems and just operate more effectively, and then just execute on that, and then just everything you do from that point forward is just better, right? Because you had the flexibility of giving yourself that grace period in the beginning to build it up correctly, rather than just trying to plan for the near term, right? Or focus only on the short term goals and gains rather than the long term strategy.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And I think it goes that way for everything. And something that kind of always motivated me too is I feel so they actually say that in about 10 years you kind of master your craft. So by the time we're getting close to retirement, we'll have both been in our careers for about 10 years. And I kind of look at it as, what do I want to do for the next 10 years? Maybe it's the same thing, but maybe I want to try something different and do something more creative. And I feel as human beings, we have all of this potential, right? We can do whatever we decide we want to do. So why not do something cool or create something cool, or push yourself out of your comfort zone to try something. And like you mentioned earlier, it helps knowing that if I fail, it doesn't matter. Because I think that's kind of what always kept me in college from, picking a different major or doing something crazy, is I went the very safe route and I got a very good job. And now it's okay, so then maybe the next phase of my life is backtracking a little bit and doing the things that I was too scared to do earlier in life, because I know I have this net to catch me.
Right. It removes fear from the equation of of that fit. Yeah, that's why most people never change career paths or never get out of positions or things that they're not happy with, is because they don't want to fail.
Right.
They're just like, even if it would be good, even if there's like a slight chance that it would be like way better, there's like, there's a better chance that, it might not work out. And then what do I do? Because do I go back to where I was? Can I go back to where I was? Yeah. Right. What do I do if it doesn't work out? Do I have to find something different? And then I don't know what that is. It's a big question mark. Right. And then, people just lock up and shut down and they say, nope, not worth it. And then just keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think that happens more often than not. And so, don't be afraid to pick a more ambitious goal on this list. Maybe it's not in your 30s, maybe it's in your 40s or 50s, but what would you do if you just got an extra 10 to 20 years of your life back where you don't have to go in to work 40 hours a week, and if you enjoy it, keep doing it, right? Like we might get to that point in a few years and be like, no, we're happy where we are. But why not push yourself to at least give yourself the option, right? So in 5 years, I'll be able to sit here and be like, I can choose to continue working or I can choose to quit and never step foot in an office again, right? But I'll have the choice. And if nothing else, the freedom that comes with that is incredible.
Right. You have no stress in your life at that point anymore because you're not worried about, oh, my job's terrible right now, but I have to keep doing it. I have to put up with it. Or I have to do this stuff to get this next promotion. Right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you've seen people or know people from, when you were younger and you watched them grow up and it's like they age 5 years in a month because they're so stressed about their job or working or getting food on the table. And yeah, money is the number one cause of stress in our lives. It's the number one reason for divorces, right? Mm-hmm. If you can remove money from being an issue, then you're just happier, right? And that's right. That's a whole saying, money can't buy happiness.
Right, and the people that do have a lot of money are, unhappy for the most part.
Right.
The Jim Carreys or you could be like Kanye, I guess. You got $1 billion, but you're mostly crazy.
Nobody really knows if he's happy or not because he just never smiles. Well, and I think too, if you just continue making more money and then you just keep upgrading your life, you get to a point where you realize it doesn't matter. Having a bigger house at some extent doesn't matter. Having a fancier car doesn't matter. You're still getting from point A to point B. And, I'll say it before, or I've said it before and I'll say it again, try biking, right? We haven't talked about that on the podcast in a while, but Brett has been biking with me much more lately.
Oh, yeah. My quads are not very happy about it.
Well, you're overall not complaining too much.
That's right. Except when I had to carry that watermelon in my backpack. That was quite the day.
It was worth it, though. It was delicious.
Uphill both ways.
Yeah. It just seems like no matter where we go, we're always uphill with you.
That's right. I don't know. We got to change these routes around.
All right. Well, we are starting to ramble now like we usually do. So did you have anything else you want to say on the topic of retiring or motivating people to save?
Where can people find the graph or the calculator that you used for this formula?
I am going to put this graph in the blog post that comes up with this podcast. So you can find it at our website, moneyinthebankpodcast.com. And I will also link to a calculator where you can kind of project out to see how much you need to save in your situation with your numbers. Because, maybe you're not starting at zero. So this assumed you were starting at zero, but maybe you have saved up something and you're wondering, okay, I think I'm behind, so let's say you started saving when you were 33 and I just told you needed to be saving 25% and you were saving 10%. Well, now you're, 40 and you kind of want to know what your new percentage is. So I'll link a calculator that will help people kind of visualize where they are for their personal situation.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to contact me. I love hearing from you guys. And I will link all of my contact information in. And thank you again.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Money in the Bank. Make sure to subscribe to us on the iTunes or Stitcher app so that you get weekly alerts every time we post a podcast. Or if you want, you can visit my website, moneyinthebankpodcast.com. And if you want to reach out with any questions or further comments, please email me at Angie@moneyinthebankpodcast.com. I look forward to hearing from you.
Money in the bank.